Welcome to Root Cause Medicine, presented by Spirit of Health, transforming lives through real health solutions. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Root Cause Medicine podcast. I'm Dr. Vaughn with Spirit of Health, and we have back again for another episode, Dr. Stuart Hoover. Thank you once again for joining us.
Great to be back.
Amen. Well, today we want to talk about chronic illness and actually want to get into some more serious, specific issues, even such as cancer, because Dr. Hoover has quite a bit of experience in this area. And I know this is obviously a major problem in our world today, and especially in the United States. So maybe, Dr. Hoover, we could start with you sharing your clinical background a little bit, and maybe a little bit about your practice that you had down in Springfield, Missouri for 20 plus years. And I'd even love to hear a little bit about how it shifted, your practice shifted a little bit into actually working with people with more serious issues.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Well, thanks again for having me on today. And for those of you that may have not heard me on one of these other podcasts, I kind of started my career out on the other side of the fence, I like to call it, in hospital administration. And early on began to realize that, this approach to medicine really wasn't something I was comfortable with. It just seemed like I was watching, more focus being put on, disease care and joint replacements and all these kind of things that was going on, and not really digging into the root cause, which I was actually dealing with some health challenges myself, and found myself wanting to get out of the box a bit and began researching, kind of looking at, is there anything I could do myself to improve my health, and quickly began to realize that I had to start looking at lifestyle. I was like so many people, burning the candle at both ends, not eating well, not hydrating, not getting enough sleep. And as I began to change my lifestyle, even making small changes, it was remarkable how different I felt. And it really kind of opened the door to this whole new world at that time, where I thought was new, but it actually been around pretty much forever. And, I decided at that time I had to change direction. I really wanted to be in a position of helping to educate and empower people, and helping people really understand the body more from a functional, foundational level, and how, we can take responsibility for our health by making the proper lifestyle changes, regardless of what we're dealing with. So, started my practice up, was in Springfield for 21 years. And it was really interesting, because I'm dating myself a little bit now, because I've been in this field for about 30 years. I remember coming out of school and thinking, man, this is going to be great. I'm going to have people eating better organic foods. I'm going to get everybody to buy a juicer, and we're just going to conquer this disease process. And,
Right.
quickly realized that, juicing was fun for a little while, but people weren't going to stick with it. And, eating was always the elephant in the room to
Mhm.
get people to think about what they're putting in. And, we helped a lot of people. I had to kind of evolve and listen and adapt. But, it was interesting as our practice started gaining more traction, how we started attracting more people with more serious health conditions, people coming in with autoimmune problems, diabetes. And these are things that they were being treated for, but they just weren't getting better. They were getting worse.
Right.
And then eventually even evolving into really the last 10 years of practice, working with a lot of folks dealing with cancer, where they
Mhm.
were coming in, a lot had been already kind of through the traditional cycle, and things were coming back, and they're like, there's just not a lot of answers for me there. Or they were kind of new coming into maybe, being diagnosed with cancer, and they just weren't quite comfortable with, the traditional route to treat that. They had a lot of questions. And, in that space, and what I want to make sure we make people understand is, we're not here talking about treating cancer or what the medical system does is wrong, because the medical system does incredible things for treating and obliterating cancer. The challenge is that it takes a great toll on the body.
Right.
And, most people when, they unfortunately die of cancer, a lot of times the cancer was actually eliminated.
Mhm.
It's the body just didn't hold up. It was so diseased and dysfunctional that it just couldn't hold up during that process. So something else actually was really their true demise. So we were seeing people from all over the country that were coming to us, and one of the first things I let people know is, look, we're not here to treat cancer. We're not here to talk you out of doing chemo or radiation. That's between you and your medical doctor. What we're here to do is to help dig a little deeper and figure out, how the body got in a position to let cancer kind of set up shop and take over. Because what people need to understand is we all produce cancer cells in our body every day.
Mhm.
And it's just the environment gets so dysfunctional and toxic and anaerobic in the body that all of a sudden cancer has a better opportunity to kind of set up shop. And so, our whole approach was, look, whatever you decide to do allopathically is up to you. What we're going to talk about is not an option because this isn't a treatment. This is helping people understand that you have to address the foundational side of taking care of yourself, improving cellular health, gut health, these types of things, detoxing the body efficiently. And when you do that, you're now putting your immune system in the forefront to kind of fighting these battles. And that's really what we want. And we had tremendous success. I still have connection with lots of our clients we had that were coming in with terminal cancers, and, some were headed towards hospice. And, 15 years later, we're still talking with them. And it's not that we cured cancer, we just helped empower them
Mhm.
to take charge of the body. I remember one gentleman in specific that was literally carried in our clinic. He
Mhm.
was that weak.
Wow.
And he knew that if he started chemo at that point, he said, I'll never survive. I know how I feel. And I remember talking to him years later about our first meeting when he came in. And he said, when you sat down with me and the first words out of your mouth was, I want you to understand I don't treat cancer. He said, everything in me just said, I need to get up and leave.
Right.
He said, but it was the next 5 minutes that changed everything. When I explained to him what my role was in this journey with him is to
Yeah.
help get to the root and educate. And he brought up a really interesting point. He said, what you allowed me to do was participate.
Mhm.
And that's always stuck with me because I think so many times when we go to the doctor and we're given the bad news or the diagnosis, we kind of think that's the gospel.
Right.
And there's only one way to approach it. And there really isn't. It's just in that space that may be it.
Mhm.
But when he said, you allowed me to participate in my care, and I asked him, what did that mean? He goes, well, you helped to educate me. You helped to guide me. You helped me to understand, that even though I had this cancer over here, I had a lot of problems with gut health that I'd had since I was little, and had really never been dealt with. He had been on tons of antibiotics when he was younger. And basically his immune system was just failing.
Yeah.
And so, we're not going after the cancer. We're going after, let's build the immune system up. Let's focus on the immune system. And, and that's really what I want people to try to understand about, our field of naturopathic or integrative or foundational or functional medicine is it's really about understanding the whole picture and helping to set up a plan that kind of addresses it all
Yeah.
and not just, a treatment. And that's it.
Yeah. Amen. Well, in the last episode, we were talking about nutrient deficiencies. We were talking
Mhm.
about minerals and vitamins, and we were talking a little bit about cellular health
Right.
and how important cellular health is.
Mhm.
And since we are on the topic of cancer, I think it's interesting because when people have autoimmune disease or diabetes, like diabetes, you're thinking of blood sugars and pancreas and insulin,
Mhm.
but everything really is cellular.
Right.
The thing about cancer, what most everyone understands, even if you understand very little about cancer, you understand that there's a problem at the cellular
Right.
level, right?
That's correct.
Yes,
Absolutely.
abnormal cellular function.
Mhm.
So the question would be, what causes abnormal cellular function and how do you correct it?
Well, the first thing we have to look at, and we did talk about this one on one of the other episodes, is that we are made up of trillions of cells that make up our tissue, organs, and systems. So, regardless of where the disease process is, it all began from poor cellular health, poor cellular function. So, when we think of our cells, they're just like little generators of energy. That's their job, is to make energy to run the body, right? And the cell membrane has an electrical charge on it.
Right.
And what we have found is that because of a lack of things like trace minerals, lack of hydration, over oxidation, things in the body, we begin to lose this electrical charge on the cell membrane. So, what that means is that the cell just becomes less functional. It has a harder time absorbing nutrients. It has a harder time converting those nutrients into energy, which the body needs to run all of these systems.
Hmm.
It's really not complicated. I always say, what we do really isn't rocket science. It's just, I think we all want rocket science because it's cool. But, this is just getting down to the basics of how the body functions. So, if we can improve cellular health, truly improve
Right.
that electrical potential to the cell membrane so it absorbs better, it hydrates better, it detoxes better, it communicates better, produces better energy, that's really where we win and lose the fight.
Hmm.
Is when we lose that potential, then we're now putting ourselves at risk of things like genetic issues, that maybe cancer was a high risk in your family and you were passed along these genes that only mean that there's potential. It doesn't mean it's destiny.
Right.
And if the body isn't functioning properly, then it may lean more towards that encoding
Hmm.
instead of overriding it.
Hmm.
And that's what, I hope a takeaway from today's conversation is going to be, that is we do have the power to kind of override that and put the body in a position of striving towards health. I mean, this was proven during the Genome Project, when they determined that it was epigenetics that really drive genetic output. Epigenetics are simply kind of our lifestyle. It's what are we putting in the body? How are we supporting cellular health?
Right.
And that to me is just foundational. That's where it has to begin.
The way I like to think about it logically, if we're
Hmm.
talking about genetics,
Hmm.
okay, let's talk about genetics. Let's say you are genetically predisposed to something
Hmm.
because of your family line.
Hmm.
My grandpa had this, my dad had this, and I have this. I always try to get people to think critically, right? If there is a problem within your genetics, how did that genetic problem start,
Hmm.
right? So, like you said, it's not inevitable.
Right.
Genes are changing all the time.
Right.
It really depends on what they're exposed to.
That's correct.
So, your grandfather and father might have some issue because of some genetic changes because your grandfather was a heavy chain smoker,
Correct.
right?
Right.
That's going to affect genetics. That's going to affect future generations.
Correct.
I think what we don't hear that we need to hear a lot is if there's problems that happened years back in your family line that caused genetic issues, why on earth do we not believe that if we can mess genes up, why don't we believe that we can heal genes?
Yeah, we
We can
can we
heal,
can certainly change the
yeah,
expression.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Sunshine, certain nutrients,
Hmm.
um, getting the right environment in the body can actually change genes for the better. And people need to
Absolutely.
hear that because they need to have hope that they can heal from their issues because the medical system often makes people feel hopeless and there's nothing
Right.
you can do.
Well, I used to do nutrigenomic testing and things in our clinic. I remember years back when it first started coming out, and you and we like information, right? It's like we want to empower people with their blueprint.
Right.
And it was so interesting when I would sit down with somebody and we would review their results, and it would show that they had a greater potential for diabetes, for instance. And they're sitting there going, well, I'm overweight. I can't lose weight. My doctor's telling my blood sugars are continuing to climb. It's inevitable. It's almost like that's our thinking today. If it's in the genes, it's not fixable.
Hmm.
And that is not true at all.
Amen.
And we can, by improving cellular function and health, the body really strives for one thing every day, and that is perfection. It wants
Mm,
to run healthy, it wants to repair, it wants to have plenty of energy. And it really does come down to how the cell is being supported. And, that's where we get now into, what we're putting in.
right.
Are we putting the right things into the body?
Mhm,
Are we moving the body? Are we hydrating? And, that it almost again sounds too simplistic,
right.
but it's proven. And you're right, when you can improve cellular, genetic output, what you now do is you start building healthy cellular function, genetic function moving forward.
Mhm.
And young parents, they need to think about that, that they can have an influence, especially with their children, and teaching them more about this.
Yeah, and we absolutely know it's true. The challenge is we don't hear it mainstream, so
Right.
people don't have a lot of hope because they don't hear the stories. But you and I, being in this industry, we know that there's tens of thousands of people who had cancer and don't have cancer anymore.
That's
We
right.
know that there's Gerson therapy. We know there's
Hmm.
clinics down in Mexico. We know that people can do juicing. We know people have gone raw. I know
Hmm.
people who've done went carnivore
Right.
and they don't have cancer anymore. So there's all kinds of stories, tens of thousands of stories of people healing from cancer
Right.
without chemo and radiation.
Right.
It's just people don't hear those stories, so they feel hopeless, and they're like, obviously there's a lot of fear, like, oh my gosh, I have cancer, I better treat it. If I don't do
Hmm.
something, I'm gonna die. Like that's the fear. They're getting pressure from family members,
Right.
and so
That's a big thing.
yeah, and so
I mean,
people just need to have a place to start to have hope, understand what's happening in the body, and have some practical things that they can do to move in that direction, some books, some resources, something. But the medical system's supposed to give us informed consent, right? Like, hey, we can do this, but this is the side effects or what the problems can be. It's kind of like you said, like if people want to make those choices, that's totally between them and their doctor. That's fine, but they should be given the alternative and
right.
an understanding that there either one is another way or
Hmm.
two that you could possibly do both.
Right.
But the last thing we want to do is completely ignore our foundational health, our
Hmm.
cellular health, possible root cause. And these are the things that aren't talked about enough.
No, and it's interesting going back to my clinic and kind of my journey. I was in an interesting area in Missouri to where the medical system was the largest employer. And I remember when I opened my clinic, the pushback we got.
Mm,
I even went through a full medical evaluation because I had a medical doctor upset with us and thought, we were in their space practicing, and went through this and came out with shining colors. Matter of fact, the guy was like, "You're exactly what this industry needs," because we were educating people from
right,
day one who we are and who we aren't.
right.
But it's just the way the system is today. Again, I don't want to pick on the medical system because it's just the way they're trained. It's the way it's driven. It's driven towards treatment, diagnostics, chemo. That's it. I mean, it's 11th largest industry in the world. So it is what it is. But we can't lose sight that we have to be involved in our own healthcare. And I used to have those doctors that push back on us and our clients towards the last 5, 7, 8 years of our practice. They were referring people to us, and the reason they were doing it is because they were noticing not only were cancers not growing, they were reversing.
Hmm.
People weren't succumbing to all these side effects. I used to have people come in my office all the time, and they just can't, when you're in chemotherapy, a lot of times you're with the same people. You're on these schedules, and you're literally just watching people disintegrate and eventually die. And they would come in and say, "I feel so guilty because my hair's not falling out.
Yes.
My complexion's good. they're almost like, why are you in here?" And
Right.
it was just simply what we were doing was helping the body to function better. So even as they were going through chemo, it had a better opportunity to fight off these side effects. So again, it's not an either or. The message I like to tell people is it's fine if you decide to go down that conventional path, but you cannot eliminate supporting your body. You know,
Right.
I think today there's enough information out there, even in the medical system, that if somebody's working with a medical doctor and they're telling them, nutrition doesn't play any role, hydration, stress, any of this stuff, lack of sleep, you got to go find a new doctor
And a lot of
out
them
there.
still say those things.
I know, I know,
Yeah.
but we know better. We've seen enough in the numbers out there,
Yeah.
and I think today people are kind of getting it. The beauty, I guess, of even the internet and stuff is there's so much more information coming out, well studied, well documented information.
Right.
But just think back. Think back. We used to not have chemotherapy centers and radiation centers. Decades ago. People they saw doctors that showed up at the house that taught them about nutrition and herbs and things like that to keep them going. And it's an industry that's evolved, and we can't forget how our bodies were created. They were created to self heal.
Right. Yeah. I always like to help people see that the Greek root word doctor actually means teacher.
Teacher,
And that's
absolutely.
what doctors had done through all of history, that they're supposed to be doing is teaching people, educating, empowering people, um, so that they can make a wise decision that they have peace with and they feel most comfortable with.
That's
And
right.
we need to be doing more of that. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring that back, right?
Right, right. Yeah, it's not something that just started. It's so interesting, and I know you've dealt with this too. When people, go through this process and they regain their health, they're kind of like, "Oh, I'm so glad this is finally available." And I'm like, it's always been there.
Right.
It was just a real pivot when pharmacopoeia and things came in because naturopathic medicine and herbology and Ayurvedic medicine. These were all the original medicine principles that were taught in school.
Right.
But, as things evolved and became more industrialized and pharmaceuticals came in and things, it all just changed.
Hmm.
And so we know that, taking care of the body, nutrition, hydration, stress reduction, sleep is so vital to our health. And that's where we have to really turn the attention, especially those of us that are dealing with these terminal or chronic health issues today.
Yeah. And I think it's important, again, just staying on this topic of cancer, we talk about genetics,
Hmm.
and I think it's unfortunate that that is the mainstream belief or
Hmm.
understanding, because there's a lot of research out now showing that cancer is more environmental
Right.
than it is genetic.
Right.
And that's what we're not hearing. That's what we're not understanding. And unfortunately,
Mhm,
a lot of these big companies, these big corporate giants who produce these herbicides and these pesticides and these chemicals that are in our food and the chemicals in our personal care products, etc., they're carcinogenic. They're cancer causing. So what I always share with people is, even if you have a scary diagnosis, which
mhm,
cancer obviously can be a scary diagnosis, there's always a cause,
mhm,
and there's always two things you have to address. Number one is you have to address your deficiencies. Kind of like you've been saying, cells are designed to work a certain way. For the cells to have light and energy and to function
mhm,
properly, they have to have the right nutrients, and we're all chronically deficient in nutrients. But I also share with people is there's always a toxicity involved.
mhm.
If you
Huge influence.
have some serious diagnosis, something caused that. You don't get
Mhm.
a serious disease from nothing.
Right.
And it's not it's most likely not genetic, or maybe there's a 3% chance you're predisposed to something genetically. But the reality is, and I've gone so far as to even do videos on this where I'm just trying to educate people, that I think a more accurate diagnosis to give people would be that you have a fungal overgrowth, you have mold
Mhm,
toxicity, you have Lyme disease, you have parasites. I've seen crazy stories, hundreds of stories of people healing from a quote unquote diagnosed disease by clearing parasites out of their body. We
right.
have herbicides, we have pesticides. God is a good designer of the human body. And the onslaught of toxins and poisons we see today is unprecedented.
Right.
There has to be a reason why we have more and more and more and more cancer than ever before, even though the medical system for 60 plus years. If you remember, Richard Nixon declared a war on cancer. We're going to find the
Right.
cure to cancer.
We're always been that close.
We're still looking for it, right? But yet we have more cancer than ever before. So are we looking in the wrong places?
Yeah. Well, we're obviously not looking at the whole picture and looking at the terrain in the body, I like to call it,
Right.
that surrounds these cells and things that are influencing it, like we talked about with epigenetics. Epigenetics are simply, outside influences that are coming in and affecting the body. Well, a lot of that is the toxins that we're exposed to today.
Right.
Even in our drinking waters and things, simple things that we're doing in the house, all these haloids, chlorine, fluoride, bromides, all these things, prescription drugs that are showing up in our water system
Yeah.
today
They
that
are.
people are ingesting. And it does create quite a toxic load on the body. And I think we touched on this earlier about, people that are fighting weight issues. And, we know the numbers are skyrocketing with obesity in our country today. And, when you begin to store more fat in the body and the body begins to burn muscle, it starts turning to trying to burn muscle for energy. Um, it's a lot of times it's due to the fact that you're storing toxins, and fat doesn't produce oxygen the way muscle does.
Right.
It leaves the body in a more anaerobic space. That means that, when we have less oxygen, that's one of the things that cancer thrives on
Mhm.
in the body. So, we have to again get back to looking at, the condition, I call it. What's the condition of the body to support cancer
Mhm.
or not cancer?
Right.
And detox I have found is critical. We do a lot. We focus an awful lot on detox. I know you do as well.
Mhm.
And that's not only detoxing the liver and the kidneys, which a lot of people think about, but it's going all the way down to the cellular level
Right.
and making sure that the cells are properly functioning so they can release metabolic waste. Heavy metals don't get bound up in there, other toxins. And then making sure that all these exit mechanisms, I call it, lymphatic, liver, and kidney, are functioning properly. Because, a lot of times people may start doing one detox and then all of a sudden they get sick because one of these channels is being supported, but the other ones are all jammed up,
Mhm.
and it creates problems. And that's why I love taking the approach of cellular, lymph, kidney, and liver.
Mhm.
That we're detoxing all the time.
Right.
It's not like one system works at one time, the other works at, another time. So we need to really support all of those channels and exit mechanisms to efficiently detox.
Yeah, and you learn these things over the years, clinically. I've
Right.
been doing this 15 years, so only about half the amount of time,
Hmm.
that you've been doing it. But I've definitely changed my approach over the
Hmm.
years, and I do mostly work with people with chronic illness. And
Hmm.
now my approach, I'll be just curious what your thoughts on it. My approach with every person now is I'm looking first at their deficiencies,
Hmm.
and I didn't used to do that before. I'd be right into detox.
Right.
So now I'm supporting nutritional deficiencies because I understand cellular health and I understand the body will not work right and detox right if it doesn't have the right magnesium or potassium or iodine or trace minerals or whatever. So I one address nutritional deficiencies. Two is I'm looking at drainage. We call it
Right.
drainage. Everything you just talked about, we use the term drainage.
Right.
How many times are your bowels moving a day? How well are your kidneys functioning? Do you have liver congestion or some liver issues? Uh,
Hmm.
could we get in a sauna and sweat toxins out through our skin?
Hmm.
How are we supporting the drainage pathways? And then so now detox for me and the way I approach health and chronic illness is detox is now third on the list because it's nutritional deficiencies first, then making sure we're supporting and opening drainage pathways before we detox.
Absolutely. And I think it's absolutely spot on because so many times, we're trying to push the body to detox, but it doesn't have the cellular support to accomplish that.
Right.
And you're right, so much of it is trace mineral deficiencies. Magnesium is huge in, proper, energy production in the cells. How things contract and relax and move things through the body. So, addressing the nutrient deficiencies, which is not complicated, it's kind of getting away from this green allopathic model that, I've got to treat something, I've got to target something. but why not build the body up first, support good cellular function, get the body more nutrient dense and working. And guess what happens? Things start coming online, I call it.
Right.
It's like the cells begin to work better. Now the tissues are working, now the organs, now the systems. And many times with that approach, you're avoiding having to do a lot of drastic detoxing.
Right. Right. It's true.
Yeah,
Yeah. Amen. So yeah, I think I always love to give people practical steps and
sure.
practical things that they can do. And you've been working with, I know we talked in the last episode about, Mother Earth Labs,
Mhm.
some of their products, which I think are the best. um, but people don't think about those types of supplements or products oftentimes when they're thinking about chronic illness or something
Right.
as serious as something like cancer.
Hmm.
So what would be a few things that you feel like somebody would need to take if they're trying to overcome cancer? Now, again, they have to make that decision. Am I going to quote unquote treat cancer
Hmm.
because of my diagnosis, how much time the doctor said I have, how aggressive it is? We have all those factors that we
Hmm.
have to pray about and talk to our family about and all of those things. But we're talking about restoring health long term,
Right.
regardless of what other treatments we do. What should people be taking right away?
Well, and even, if they do elect to go there, we're not talking about even an alternative. We're talking about whether you choose not to or to, you still need to focus on building foundational health back. Because it's even more important if you do choose to go through those conventional methods that your body is going to be under great insult.
Right.
It's already dysfunctional and under insult. It's only going to be greater. I have a protocol I love to use. We did this with hundreds and hundreds of people in our clinic that came through with cancer. And the neat thing is it didn't interfere with anything. It used to be
Yeah.
doctors were concerned with taking vitamin C or antioxidants that it would disrupt chemo, and we found it to be quite the contrary. When we got the cells functioning better in the body, so using our humic and fulvic, which is such a great foundational support for cellular health, it's not only improving cellular energy. We talked about that earlier, how the cells membrane functions to where it can absorb and hydrate and detox and communicate better. You're getting a wealth of trace minerals that are involved in pretty much every process in the body.
Right.
You're getting wonderful detox components, these binders that come in and can pull metals and toxins and things out of the body safely. So that's kind of going at it from that cellular approach. The next, I'm a big, big fan of anybody going through this and working with improving gut health.
Hmm.
This was a standard protocol for us. It's like, I understand you're dealing with cancer, but we're going to work with cells in the gut. The gut is so instrumental in immune function. Over three-quarters of our immune system is kind of dictated to by the health of the gut, right?
Right.
So why not focus on an area that has a big impact on the immune function? So improving gut health, something like our GI Ultramax, which is an all-in-one kind of gut support product that helps with inflammation reduction, detoxification, repairing of the gut lining, ensuring that we're not, in this chronic inflamed autoimmune type of state that we've got to get out of, improving hormonal regulation. A lot of cancers today are kind of connected to hormone dysfunction
Right.
as well. When people hear of things like estrogen dominance, it may just be that the body's not producing enough other hormones to help balance.
Right.
We are exposed to a lot of exogenous estrogens today, but I've found sometimes it's just, maintaining balance of hormones.
Mm.
And a lot of that is influenced by the microbiome in the gut. So supporting gut health to me is ground zero. And then the next, when we talk about nutrient deficiencies, that's pretty complex because you're getting into all of the vitamins and minerals and enzymes and antioxidants and different things that are used in the body to help beef it up, to help it fight the good battle.
Hmm.
And something like our pH balancer is a phenomenal product. We've used that very successfully to help get what I like to almost call pre-digested nutrients into the body because we're bringing the right forms biological forms of nutrients in to support cellular health while we're over here working on the gut and improving other things that maybe the gut's not absorbing properly.
Hmm.
So we want to kind of take that stress off the body. So
Yeah.
to me, our humic and fulvic, our pH balancer, our GI Ultramax product, and as you mentioned earlier, not overlooking the magnesium deficiency that people are dealing with today. We've got a pretty unique product called Magnesium ER. It's a 7-form magnesium product. There are different forms of magnesium used. I think magnesium is becoming almost more of a household name today. I think more and more people are getting it. I think more practitioners are starting to look at magnesium deficiencies. So, these are just a great kind of foundational protocol, even if it's a person out there that is going through cancer treatments, or they're looking, to maybe let me try to get the body in better shape even before I start a process like this.
Yeah.
That would be a wonderful start.
That's great. Well, I have a clinical question for you. I'd just be curious your thoughts on it. I understand the foundational support. It's interesting the things you mentioned are the same products we talked about when we were talking about
Hmm.
basic nutritional deficiencies, right?
Yeah.
And it just shows that everybody needs these things regardless of what your condition is. It's just cancer's that kind of that end game that
Right.
the disease process has progressed so much that now we have this serious diagnosis, but the root of it is often the same, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
the treatment is often very similar as far as addressing deficiencies. But one thing I have found, and this is, I'm just curious, I do lab testing on people. I find a lot of people with mold toxicity,
Hmm.
a lot of people with Lyme disease, a lot of people with chronic viral issues like
Hmm.
Epstein-Barr virus and other viruses. And I know these are linked to cancer. There's even books written
Hmm.
about the connection between parasites and cancer. It
Hmm.
is interesting out there that everybody's using ivermectin and
Right.
fenbendazole, and now there's cancer treatment protocols related to those medications. Why? I mean, they're antiparasitic. So,
Right.
like what's going on here, right? I was just curious clinically if that's something you found or how you dealt with those infections, or did you, just by addressing the underlying deficiencies, did you find that those issues kind of self-corrected, or do you actually have to go in there and, quote unquote, because a lot of times we're thinking like we need to kill the fungus or kill the
Right.
mold or kill the candida in there.
Mhm.
What was your approach to that?
Well, used to be before I kind of learned about this real foundational approach, like we're talking about, we may go after targeting the candida, which a lot of that can be controlled with diet as well. I tell you, the reason I kind of go back to the standard protocol is, again, we're trying to set the body up for success, to create a more balanced environment in the body. Even the gut, when we correct the gut environment, the microbiome, it's harder for parasites to exist. We talked about viruses. Humic is a very powerful antiviral, by the way. And we're actually working with companies over in Europe now that are doing a lot of research on this COVID virus and post-vax and stuff, and looking at the influence that humic has. Ivermectin, I think you're right. It's gained a lot of traction. It's almost like a repurposed drug. It's been out there forever. But,
Right,
because it does deal with parasites, we know there's a connection there.
right,
But, the viral aspect, I have found in my practice that, the humic and fulvic provide such a wonderful protection of the cell from repeated viral influence. It's like we're cutting the half life down of that. It's a very powerful antiviral as well.
good,
And then, supporting the body with these right nutrients, in there so it can just function better. I just think it's such a solid approach. Now, does it mean we can't employ other things? Absolutely. There's many things we can use. I think of our advanced detox support
hmm,
and adding something like that in, to where we're just giving additional help to the drainage process, as you eloquently mentioned a little bit ago, helping the lymph, kidneys, lymphatic system drain more effectively, the bowels working more effectively. These are all things I think that, can be utilized, but I really have a hard time straying away from just that key foundational approach, because we've seen it work so many times.
right, right. You have obviously lots of clinical experience in seeing
Yeah,
people get better. So the proof
right.
in the pudding, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, we are nearing the end here, maybe of this
Hmm.
episode. I always like to give people hope.
Right,
And so I want to share a couple of thoughts. Maybe you could share a couple of thoughts just in summary. And I know we've talked a lot about cancer, but
right.
whether you're dealing with an autoimmune condition, or you've been told you have chronic fatigue syndrome, or you're told you have Crohn's, colitis, and we're not saying these are the only things. Obviously, there's all kinds of things out
Right.
there, and different practitioners, and different products, and all kinds of amazing things. But what I want people to maybe get out of this episode in summary is that there is hope. There is a reason that your body is not functioning properly, and it has
Hmm.
nothing to do with God's design, right? God's
Right.
design is
Yeah,
perfect.
he did his work.
He did. We're designed in his image.
Right.
He's done a great job there. It's the onslaught of toxins in our environment. It's the nutritional deficiencies because our soils have been depleted, which we talked about in the other
Hmm.
episode. And so I really want people to have hope that there are answers. There are things you can do. There
Hmm.
are people out there that are holistically minded, naturopathic doctors like you and I, and others out there who can help explain these things to people. I also want people to know that it's not a life sentence when you get a
Right.
diagnosis. It might have a genetic component, but that is definitely overused in our system, and I think that helps. That has people feeling hopeless,
Right.
and there's no answers, and it's inevitable, and there's nothing I can do, and that's a very defeating feeling.
Right.
And we want people to know that that's not necessarily your sentence, and that there are answers out there, and there is hope out there. And hopefully just this little podcast will, give you some hope.
Absolutely. Genes again have almost been kind of weaponized, I think, today. And people just need to simply understand that genetic predisposition is not destiny.
Right.
There's only a few things that we're not going to change. It's, are we male or female? How tall are we? What color are our eyes? These are just things that are just kind of set. I mean, here's an interesting thing. Everybody listening to this podcast, we're all 99.1% identical.
Wow.
There's less than a 10%,
That's
tenth of a
amazing.
percent that separates us. Okay, so what does that mean? It means we were all designed to eat certain foods, to have certain nutrients in the body, to hydrate the body properly, to move the body, to do things. I mean, think about that fact right there. We're 99.1% identical.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we just have to kind of harness that and understand that we were built and designed a specific way. And it's the farther we've strayed away from doing these foundational things, the more disease has evolved.
Right.
And, we have to kind of come back to basics here a little bit. What we're talking about today is not complicated. These aren't treatments. I know we've talked a lot about cancer today. This isn't treating cancer. If I was still, working full time in my practice today, I can tell you I'm so confident that the message we're sharing, anybody coming in, regardless of what they're dealing with, I would say, the first 3 to 6 months, this is how we're going to work.
Right.
And it would be what we've talked about today. And I'm going to hedge my bet that as we get the body functioning better from a cellular perspective, we heal the GI environment, get it working more efficiently, we're probably hitting 80% of where the dysfunctions are. And I hope that gives people a lot of hope
Yeah.
because that's not complicated. It's something everybody can do,
Amen.
regardless of where you're at in this journey or the decisions that you're looking to make. Again, this isn't a either or. What we're really talking about is just empowering yourself and taking a path to begin to put the body in a position of correcting itself.
Mhm. Amen. And that's what we need. We clearly have a system where we have, doctors and experts, and honestly a lot of big fancy words that people don't understand, and they feel like powerless, and
Right.
they don't. What can I do about this besides do what my doctor says? And so I think part of our message is that, like, you can take control of your health. You can be responsible for your own health.
Mhm.
Nothing's inevitable. Again, you can choose both the allopathic and the natural. Um, that's obviously an option as well, but we want people to be empowered. That's actually part of our mission statement, to educate and empower. You mentioned that
Right.
earlier. We have to educate and empower people, not just for themselves. People have families. There's moms out
Absolutely.
there with children that they're like, oh my gosh, my child was diagnosed with XYZ. What am I going to do? And so we have to start empowering people that actually, like, God has answers. He has from the beginning.
Hmm.
The answers haven't changed. God is
No.
the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. It's just, what are we being educated on? What's going in our minds? And what choices are we making? Because God's options are always available and man's options are always available, right? So which
Hmm.
ones are we choosing?
Absolutely. And, we have to teach the teachers. Some of the greatest successes I've had in my career are talking with parents that I worked with in the clinic when they were younger, before they had families and overcame health challenges. And now they're teaching their children
Right.
these principles. And now their kids don't have the allergies that they grew up with, or the diabetes or the autoimmune conditions that they just felt they were just dealt a bad hand.
Yeah.
And they're seeing that overcoming. And to me, it was, what we did is we just were empowering and teaching teachers out there. So again, I know people, a lot of times they're fairly skeptical about it, but, I think one, uh, we have to have faith. We have to believe in our creator. That's, to me, foundation one,
Hmm.
and believe that God created our body to be self-cleaning, self-healing, self-repairing, to run vibrant with plenty of energy. And how do we get back to that? How do we accomplish it? And it's not complicated.
Amen. Well, thank you. We're making a difference, one person at a time, one podcast at a
Absolutely.
time. Thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, your expertise in this area and giving people hope. And thanks once again for being on the show.
Well, I greatly appreciate it, and wish everybody all the best in health listening.
Thank you.
Take
Take
care.
care. Bye bye.